Hello and welcome to the Baron's Game Room. I'm Aaron as always, and I'm definitely not doing this all for a second time because I accidentally deleted my first video. I feel like there's a pretty big difference between a modern game room, where you would play things like board games, card games, dice games, and such, and a traditional game room where you would have like a pool table, shuffleboard, maybe a pinball table or something like that. Very different styles of rooms, but I feel like the games that tend to commonly go in those game rooms, the line gets a little blurry. For example, my crocodile board behind me. I personally would say this is much more in line with playing something like shuffleboard or pool and all that. But since it's small enough to be played on the table, you need to have a table it's generally considered a tabletop game. It's on BGG and everything. And I think a similar game that kind of blurs the lines between those two types of game rooms is today's subject. KLASK. KLASK is, well, I would basically call it like analog air hockey. I think we've all played air hockey at some point. We've probably played at an arcade or something like that. And I think this is basically that, but just an analog wood version you play at home with a couple extra rules added in that make it a little extra spicy, I really enjoy it, and hey, hope you guys will too if you check it out. Let's talk about it. Now, you can probably see that my KLASK board's pretty scratched up, as in I've used it quite a bit, but also I will recommend there's a little pack you can buy that comes with like extra pieces of all this stuff in case you lose some, and in that pack are these different little, gliders, lubricators, pieces that go on the bottom of your strikers here, and they help a lot. Since I put these on, I don't think I've really scratched up my board much more than it already was, so definitely recommend that pack. But anyways, let's get to explaining the setup. Each player is going to need one of these magnetic strikers. Basically, you're just going to take the top part off and place it on the board, and then the second part you're going to put underneath the board, and hey, the magnet lets you move it around. Pretty cool, right? You're going to take 3 of these white things, the game calls them biscuits, and you're going to place them on these white circles on the board. You want to make sure you place them magnet side up. One side has a hole, you can see magnet, the other one's just a little divot. You want divot down, magnet up. You're going to take these 2 chips and start them in the 0 spots, and then last you're going to give the ball to whoever is the youngest player, or just whoever you decide to go first. When it's your turn to start the ball, you can go over to either of the corners on your side of the board and start your striker and the ball off in that corner. And then you just sort of go. Now, like I said, this game is very similar to playing something like air hockey, so I'm sure you already have a general idea of how you score points, but actually in this game, there's a little bit of extra stuff added to it, so there are now 3 different ways in which you can score a point, and you're trying to be the first player to score 6 points. So let's go over those different ways to score. The first most obvious way to score points is by getting the ball into the goal, which I am not doing very well at right now. There we go. Boom, I did it. Crazy. Wow. Anyway, if you get the ball into your opponent's goal, hey, that's going to be 1 point for you. The other 2 ways are not so much ways that you get a point as a way you give your opponent a point. Since you're controlling this up here like this, if you ever end up accidentally pulling yourself into your own goal, you are now trapped and cannot get out, that will give your opponent a point. Actually, this sort of plays into another way to give your opponent a point, so I guess there's technically 4 ways to give your opponent a point. Since you are controlling your striker with the magnet underneath the board, if you get a little too wild, the striker can get away from you. If your striker ever gets away from you and flies over to your opponent's side of the board, where you can no longer get it because there's a little wall under there blocking you, then again, your opponent gets a point because you got a little too wild. And lastly, these biscuits are how the last points are played. These have magnets in them, and as the strikers get close, they can jump towards you. If either player's striker gets 2 biscuits stuck to them, then your opponent gets a point. There we go. Now, regardless of how the point is scored, be it by biscuits, by goal, by falling into the hole, which by the way they call a KLASK, or by losing track of your striker and flying out, no matter how a point was scored, anytime a point is scored at all, you will completely reset the whole board. When you reset the board, be sure to place the biscuits back in their proper places, and then make sure whichever player didn't score a point, the non-scoring player, hey, get off there, give them the ball to start off the round. They will end up doing just like at the start of the game. Whoever has the ball to start it off again will pick a corner and go there with their striker and the ball. That's resetting the board for the next round. And there really isn't much else to it. Again, you're trying to be the first player to get 6 points. There's only a couple of minor things from there, such as you can't use your little magnet under the table to try and like move around the white biscuits. But you know, you can try to knock them around with with the ball or something like that. That's totally allowed. And as far as, you know, stuff flying out of the table or anything, if biscuits fly off the table, just keep playing. If the ball flies off the table, stop. Start it back in the closest corner to where it flew out and just get the game going again. And obviously, if for any reason your striker flew out of the arena, which would be crazy, that's covered in that other point of if you lose control of your striker and can't get it back. Yeah. I feel like this is becoming a common opinion I give during my videos, where basically I say, I could try and give you my opinions on it, and I'm going to give you my opinions on it, but I feel like at this point, you probably already know whether or not you're going to like this game. I couldn't say anything at this point that I think would convince you, if you are already convinced, that you would like KLASK. I personally love traditional game room style stuff. I wish I had some room for a pool table or something like that. So things like air hockey and all that, straight up my alley. It's one reason why I absolutely love this. Totally type of games I like. I love dexterity style games like that. I love sort of, I guess, small versions of traditional game room stuff, which is one thing I like about this whole kind of blur the line stuff in general. Is you could probably have what seems like a pretty traditional game room made entirely of things like KLASK and Crokinole or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. I love these type of games. I think this is a super fun one. There is a 4-player version out there that I've never gotten my hands on, but I would love to try. And the thing is, it's not just a little air hockey world. I keep saying that, you know, that's what it's kind of, but it's not. It really is its own game, and I think it's a fantastic game. I love the just general funness of the fact that it's magnet controlled. That's always a fun little thing to see magnets working through the board and all that. I love the extra the fact that it's a little hole that it has to fall into, which you can fall into as well. So I love that you gotta be playing, but you gotta be a little careful. You have to watch what you're doing. Can't get too wild. So if you get too wild, you might fall into your own goal. And if you do, that's a point for your opponent. If you get too wild and your striker goes flying off, point for your opponent. So I kind of love that about it. And those biscuits, the little white things, I think those are a super fun addition too. Because it's really great when you're playing to have people like fighting their best to, like, you know, play the game, get the ball going, but there's that little biscuit that's made its way to your side of the board, and you have to keep working around it, because if you get too close, it's gonna jump at you and stick to you and crap. And it's so fun to watch people like try their best to like slowly maneuver around one of those so they don't get it stuck to them, or to try and hit it back towards their opponent with the ball or something like that. Also, fun fact is, because this is magnets, if you are eagle-eyed enough to notice whether or not the biscuit is on its side or standing up, you can even use that to your advantage. If it's fallen over onto its side, if you come up onto the top side with the magnet, it's going to jump at you. But if you come up on the bottom side of it with that divot, your magnet will actually push it away. So you can kind of push it away, just away from you or towards your opponent. I think that's just super fun stuff. I know it's just science and magnets, but I think it's really cool, and I have a lot of fun playing this game. If I were to force myself to come up with any kind of complaint about the game, I guess one, it would be that the original stickers that you put onto your things to keep from scratching kind of suck. That's a little crappy, but then again, I might just have an old version. Maybe if you buy it these days, they'll all have the good ones, so maybe that's not a problem. It only being 2 players is a little bit of an issue with my house, as there's not a ton of time for just 2 players to sit down and play games, but still, it's not a huge issue, especially if you're looking for a good 2-player game, and there is that 4-player version out there. And if I had to come up with one more thing, it's just, you know, it's a board with a rolling ball, and sometimes finding a level enough surface so that doesn't happen can be a little difficult to level it out, as there's no way built into this to level it out. You just kind of got to start shoving cards under a foot or something like that. But otherwise, this game's freaking great. I absolutely love it. I'm sure you already know if you'll love it or not. Price point, it's really not that expensive. I'm pretty sure, I could be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure I got that for like $40, which I think is a fantastic price for something like this. KLASK, very obviously, somehow you hadn't guessed it by now, it's definitely Baron approved, y'all.